Welcome to the Parenting Podcast, Talking ECCE. With me is Patricia Roberts from DAIU. Welcome.
Thank you.
Please tell us, what does DAIU stand for?
It stands for Developmental Assessment and Intervention Unit, but we are commonly referred to as the psychologists.
So, our discussion today will be focusing on the effects of childhood trauma on children's development and education. Can you explain what is childhood trauma and the various forms it can take?
So, trauma really refers to any event or situation that can cause harm or create a sense of threat for a child. It can be perceived or real, and there are many forms of trauma. There is community violence, there is sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, there are natural disasters, and there are two categories called complex trauma, which can refer to a group of traumatic incidents happening all at once or over a long period, or simple trauma, which can refer to a single incident like grief and loss.
So, you just explained a whole lot. How can parents and teachers support children who've experienced any one of those traumas that you've identified?
The key thing is to really create a safe space, a space where the child can feel comfortable coming to you as the adult to either talk about what happened to them or to express or demonstrate whatever their needs are.
And when we say creating a safe space, does it have a particular look or a particular feel?
Not necessarily a look aesthetically, but a culture of openness, a culture of communication, one that feels safe, one that's trusting.
Nice. So, in terms of children experiencing trauma, does that have an impact on their cognitive or emotional development? And when we talk about impact, is that going to be something that's long term?
Yes, definitely, and unfortunately, it does have an immediate and a long-term impact. So it can actually rewire children's brains. It can make them really hypervigilant, meaning they're always looking for threats, they're always feeling anxious or worried about their surroundings, they don't feel safe, they don't know how to trust, which prevents them from forming healthy attachments. And so without intervention, that can actually have ramifications all the way into adulthood, where they don't have functional relationships, where they can't function in their occupations, or even in the education system, where they have difficulty learning and just being part of a classroom.
So, in terms of not being part of a classroom and that impact, can we talk about the mental impact that can also have on a child's, overall daily, their daily life?
Certainly. One of the major things that really is a result of trauma is that ability to relax and be calm, to self-regulate, and to even regulate their emotions. So in any given day, a child can move from being very sad, being angry, becoming aggressive, being irritable, and of course, it can also impact their social relationships, how they make friends, how they interact with the teachers. It can also impact their learning and their memory, so they're unable to sit for long periods of time or grasp concepts or understand what even the teacher is saying or focus. So it can really disrupt their educational experience.
So let's talk about how can we, or what systems or what things can we put in place to help them be able to use the word self-regulate. So what does one, self-regulate mean? And two, what can we do to help them to get to that point?
So self-regulation is really about the ability to control yourself and to control your response in relation to your situation or your environment. So when you have a task or when you have something to do, how to plan, how to organize yourself, and how to follow through and execute on things, how to respond to conflicts or changes in schedule and still manage your emotions in a way that it's appropriate for the situation. And things that we can do as adults to help children regulate and manage is one, pay attention. So listen to the child, observe the child, and recognize when they are struggling and how they are struggling. And then think about what, if I was struggling, would I need to be able to do this task well and provide the incremental supports. I always say not too much at once, but little things at a time that can help the child move from point A to point B. Not all the way to Z, just point A to B.
So can you tell us some strategies that maybe parents and or teachers can utilize to get them, those little steps that we want them to in terms of dealing with trauma?
So first, of course, you have to manage your own emotions. So you, of yourself, you need to model calmness, you need to model order, you need to model self-regulation, so they have something to look towards, to emulate. And then the other thing we do is create structure and security. Children thrive in environments that are structured and secure. They like routines. They may fuss about it, but they really do blossom in routines. So you really want to keep your own day as ordered and as structured as possible, and don't let too many things be a surprise. So if you know you have to change your schedule, let your child know, okay, we're not going to do this right now, we're going to do this. And to do this, we need to do this, this, and this. And you break up the instructions into small parts that are manageable and bite-sized so that they can do one thing and focus on one thing at a time, and then you reward the achievement. And rewards don't have to be physical. It can be praise. So you praise them when they do step A, and then you praise them when they do step B, and then you praise them when they do step C.
So I'm hearing you very clearly say that communication is also a big part of helping children manage and deal with trauma.
Definitely. Right. Must communicate, and you must communicate in their language. So, we all have complicated vocabularies, but remember, we have to break our language down to the level of the child. You would not talk to a 3-year-old the same way you speak to a 15-year-old.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. In terms of education, how can the education system work to be more inclusive and supportive of children from diverse backgrounds who may have experienced some sort of trauma?
Well, this is a good first step. Creating spaces where we can have these conversations, psychoeducation, or as we call creating awareness or raising awareness about these topics is an important first step. Sometimes people just don't know. And sometimes people don't know that they know. And we need to create opportunities for persons to have access to the information as well as to ask questions and to seek clarification and to get help. So making sure that the information is available and user-friendly and accessible to as many persons as possible.
So we're talking about information in terms of the DAIU. I hope I got that correct.
Yes, you did.
What kinds of resources can persons tap into, be it parents or teachers?
So, of course, we have psychoeducational materials available like pamphlets and flyers. We also facilitate trainings and workshops, which you can request. There's material on the MOE website that you can access, but we also actually do individual intervention. So we work with parents, teachers, and the children on a case-to-case basis. You can actually make a referral, which will come to us at our multidisciplinary team meetings or MDT. We would look at the case and then we would determine what type of intervention is necessary, and individual strategies can be provided to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much. Just one quick question before we move on to a break. In terms of the intervention, would you be able to at least identify one that may be utilized? And then when we come back, we can always discuss a few others.
So one of the interventions that we would typically look into is behavior modification or play therapy, particularly for children at this age range, where we create an environment where they can explore and express their emotions through play.
Great. Thank you so very much, Patricia. So at this point in time, we'll take a break and come right back. Welcome back to the Parenting Podcast, Talking ECCE with Patricia. And where we left off, we were talking about intervention and intervention strategies. So would you like to share a few more that can be utilized to assist children who may have experienced trauma of any kind?
So, just to clarify, these intervention strategies are to be done by professionals. So, we also look at trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it is a way to sort of unstick children from the traumatic memories and allow the brain to go through its natural healing process. And CBT helps children to identify the thoughts that are associated with the emotions that then impact the behaviors. And through that, they're able to bring into their consciousness and their awareness and control how they respond as opposed to remaining in that reflexive trauma response.
I want to come back to parents. What's the parent's role in all of this? And then, of course, what's going to be the teacher's role in all this? Because we want to keep our focus. It's childhood trauma. And so how do parents and teachers continue to support their children during all of this?
So the parent's primary role is to pay attention. You must be aware of any changes in your child's mood and behavior. You are the first point of contact. You are the one who's likely to observe those initial symptoms of trauma. And so you really want to pay attention to what those symptoms are and become your own investigator. You want to have that relationship with your child where you can talk openly about what happened. And then you would be able to reach out for the necessary support. Also, you really just want to be there. You want to be involved as a parent. You want to be involved in every aspect of the child's life and make them feel like you are present and make sure that they feel secure at all times.
Can you discuss the role of resilience and protective factors in easing the negative effects of childhood trauma on a child's development and education?
So resilience refers to those internal strengths or those internal resources that children already have, whereas protective factors refer to those external resources that can either prevent or assist in the recovery from trauma. So we really want to build both. We want to build children who are able to cope and to manage, who have strong emotional intelligence, strong socio-emotional skills, strong social skills, and can navigate the difficulties of life. But we also want to shield them with a strong support system, not just the parents, but teachers and other adults who can act as advocates, who can act as role models, and who can be there to just look out for the child when there is a need.
So how do societal stigmas and misconceptions about trauma affect the support systems available for children that may have been affected by trauma?
Unfortunately, the biggest issue is that it breeds denial and it discourages parents from reaching out for help. It also can result in us shaming the victims and protecting some of the perpetrators of the trauma. And so it's really important to break down the stigma associated with mental health issues or with trauma and realize that the child is the victim and that regardless of the situation, them being a minor should never be held responsible for what happened to them. And it is our responsibility as adults to protect them.
So how and where do parents get the help?
Everywhere. So, of course, the World Wide Web is always available with a vast amount of resources. But here in Trinidad, we have the Children's Authority, we have Student Support Services Division of Ministry of Education, we have the Child Guidance Clinic, we have the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, and we have a number of other NGOs functioning here that provide not only psychoeducational material, but they provide a host of different counseling and assessment and intervention services. So at first, at least, you have persons in your school. There are guidance officers, there are social workers, there are special education officers in your schools. Reach out to them if you need more information, and the guidance will start from there.
Oftentimes, a lot of persons aren't sure, where to go, who to go to. Can a parent go directly to the school and communicate with a guidance officer or social work officer?
Yes and no. What we would really like to encourage is that parent-teacher relationship. So we really want the parent and the teacher to be on the same page and for it to be discussed between them, because the first set of intervention should really start there, with two of them having a conversation, discussing what they're observing, and perhaps putting some strategies in place. And should that not be successful in supporting the child, then collectively they can agree that, okay, a referral should be made to student support services.
So I'm hearing a lot happening there. Getting the help, communication between the child's parent or their caregiver and their teacher as their first line of defense, and then the teachers agreeing that, okay, we need to then reach out to somebody else.
Yes.
Awesome. What can parents, teachers, and communities do to raise awareness about childhood trauma and its impact?
So similarly, what we're doing now, which is create forums for conversations and discussions. And when you, as an individual in the community, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just another person living in the community, when you get information, share it. If each person shares the information with one other person, it will grow exponentially. You want to create groups, chat groups, even the parent groups, because a lot of schools have groups with parents separated into classes, and have those conversations. Talk to each other. There are forums online on the various social media pages where you can go and ask a question and generate a conversation. So we really want people to start just talking to each other about it and not kind of shoving it in the corner as a dirty secret that we don't want to discuss.
It's about creating that safe space for persons to feel comfortable having that conversation. What kind of impact do you think creating that type of space, that safe space, can have?
I certainly think it would make our communities a healthier and safer space. And more importantly, we still have a lot of adults who are dealing with their own early childhood traumas and have never had an opportunity to get help. They don't know who to talk to, and so we want to think to the future. We want to create healthy, secure children who will become healthy and secure, functional adults.
And I'm listening to you, and I can, just hearing you say that, it means that this can have an impact, a negative impact on them for a long time. So it means that we really need to put in the work now so that these issues can be addressed. Any other recommendations for parents and teachers moving forward? Because we know it can have long-term impact. What can we do? What else can we do?
So build your own toolkit. Have a toolkit of strategies that works for your child. I can sit here and give you a laundry list of strategies, but you are your expert on your child. You know your child best, parents and teachers. You interact with them every day. No amount of strategies that I can give you would be perfect, and there is no one size fit all. So it's really about putting in the work and doing that kind of trial and error to figure out which set of strategies and techniques works best with John as opposed to Jane, and really helping that child as an individual.
Because, of course, each child is different. So we really need to hone in and really observe so that we know what, as you said, can work best for them. Thank you so much, Patricia. So we're going to take a short break and come right back to the Parenting Podcast. The Parenting Podcast, Talking ECCE with Patricia. So, we've talked a lot about what trauma is. What are some signs and symptoms of trauma in children, and how might it manifest in their behavior and emotional well-being?
So again, we have to clarify that each child may present differently, but some of the common signs and symptoms include bedwetting, for example, trouble sleeping, having nightmares. Some children may become very clingy, whereas some children may become very withdrawn. There may be irritability. They may start lashing out and becoming physical or aggressive. They may start using language that you've never heard them using before. They may be angry or sad or even a little mopey. As well as a key thing is they start becoming avoidant of certain things, and you really want to look out for that.
Okay. So this is where being very observant in terms of your child's mood changes, etc., becomes really, really critical.
Yes, very.
And in terms of teachers, because parents may identify one behavior at home, and teachers, especially at the early childhood level, may identify another. So what kinds of signs can teachers look out for when we're talking about trauma in early childhood?
Well, a typical sign that teachers would pick up on is a drop in academic performance. So something that you may notice is that the student who may have been average or above average is suddenly not performing as well as they used to. Sometimes they're just not completing tasks. You may not see them go outside during recess or lunch. They may be very sensitive towards other students interacting with them, a little irritable with their peers, or not interacting with their peers at all. And you may also find them sleeping a lot more, even during class. So they may put their heads down, or they may just lose focus on the topic and start staring off into the distance. So you really want to pay attention to how well they are engaging in the everyday activities of the classroom.
And also something like a child who's normally very bubbly and comes in maybe a couple of days and seems to be really very
down, very sulky, very withdrawn. That is a change in mood and behavior, and you really want to flag that.
Okay, great. So we've observed their changes. Mm-hmm. And so what are the steps in terms of reaching to the DAIU? Is it that the parent communicates with the teacher and that they've noticed these changes? What happens next?
So we call that the pre-referral stage, where we really want the school to be involved and to try to put in some strategies, at least initially at home and in the classroom. And then there is something called the SBIT, or the School-Based Intervention Team, which is supposed to be functioning in all of the schools, where you have a group of selected teachers and administrators who may then take it up a notch and look carefully at the case and again try some strategies. When those strategies don't seem to be working, then we decide as a collective parent, teacher, administrator to send a referral to Student Support Services Division. And that referral comes through the district office to our multidisciplinary team, which comprises school social workers, guidance officers, special education, as well as the DAIU, the Developmental Assessment and Intervention Unit. And together, we look at the case and we determine, based on the presentation, which of these specialists will initiate intervention with the student. So it may not necessarily be that the child will come straight from the classroom to see a psychologist of the DEIU. There are other units that have specializations that can provide support. And again, should their interventions not be successful in managing the behavior, then that case can be brought back to the MDT and referred again internally within SSSD to the DEIU.
So there's a lot happening in terms of in the background.
Yes.
After that initial, agreement between the parent and the teacher that this is the next step that we need to take.
Yes.
Are there any success stories? I mean, we spoke earlier on that trauma can have a lifelong or a long impact on the child or even as they become adults. Are there any success stories that you're willing to share?
Many. We've been in the ministry for the past 10 years, so we've seen quite a number of students, but there's always this one child who comes to mind. Of course, we'll allow them to remain anonymous, but he was in a family that was very chaotic. I believe that the parent really didn't have the skills and the bandwidth or the capacity to manage the household. He demonstrated a lot of disruptive behaviors, very aggressive, very active child. So of course that doesn't always bring out the best in adults around you. And one of my colleagues, a behavioral specialist, was assigned the case and started to work with him individually. And through her individual interactions with the student, he actually became the one who started changing the dynamics in the family and started helping the parent to change their language, change how they respond to conflict, and even his ability to articulate his needs then helped the parent to parent better. And we recognized through this intervention that even though we weren't working as directly with the parent, by empowering the child and allowing that child to really understand themselves and their needs and what is appropriate, and to make them feel like they can achieve, they did achieve.
Yes. So really giving him the tools that he needed really made a big impact, not only on him, but on his family. I'm sure wider circle as well, because I'm sure there was a huge change in school as well.
Yes,
in terms of behavior and how he continued to thrive and succeed. Yes. Trisha, thank you so very much for joining us on the Parenting Podcast, talking ECCE. Our focus was effects of childhood trauma on children's development and education. Thank you for joining us on the Parenting Podcast, talking ECCE. If you have questions, feel free to email ecce@moe.gov.tt or on the Ministry of Education's social media platforms. Thank you.